Celebration's going. All right. Welcome to NECA, Northeast Christian Apologetics book study. My name is Simon Williams, and tonight you're going to be doing a little book study with me. We're going to be reading through and discussing the 5th chapter of On Guard by Dr. William Lane Craig. And so a couple of things I want to mention before we get started. I'm using a different mic tonight than I have previously. And this mic is really sensitive, so you're probably going to be able to hear a lot of things going around on the house. I'm just trying to test this mic out now, see if we get the feedback problems with this one, and see if I can just continue to get the improve the stream, you know. But so as a reminder, I'm going to be reading On Guard from my Kindle. And that is going to be, you can get On Guard from Amazon and also from christianbooks.com. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about, and my setup is a little different here too, so I'm going to be looking over here and all over the place really. But today we're talking about the fine-tuning argument. And as you can see on the screen right over here, it says that the argument's really simple. You know, it's the fine-tuning of the universe is explained is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Premise 2 is not due to physical necessity or chance. And 3, the conclusion, therefore, it is due to design. So very simple arguments, again, as at least being able to remember it and stuff. But as with all arguments, it becomes a lot more complicated as you dive into it and start defending it. It's always more difficult to defend a position than it is to just be skeptical of something. But yeah, Dr. Craig is going to be defending this through On Guard. And as always, I'm emphasizing that this is an introduction. So please bear that in mind. And if you want resources in order to go into a deeper dive of the material, reach out to me, and I can definitely help you get a hold of that kind of stuff. So let me know in the comments if you guys are hearing any audio problems throughout the stream, and I'll try to address them before they get too bad. But if there is no questions or anything like that, then I think that we can jump into reading. And today I have it set up so that you can actually see the book as I'm reading it. So maybe that will help with engagement and make it so that you can understand what I'm saying and why I'm saying. And it also helps me because it makes my workload a lot less, because then I don't have to bring up all the pictures and everything like that. We'll see how this goes. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll move on with our book study, reading together. Chapter 5 of On Guard. Why is the universe fine-tuned for life? And Dr. Craig prefaces this chapter with Romans chapter 1, verse 20, which reads, I am told that my mic is a touch too quiet. I can bring it up a little bit. So, yeah, let me know if the audio is good or bad. And I can help with that. The only reason why I have it set the way that I do is because I don't want it to pick up everything that's happening in the house. This, like I said, this mic is really sensitive. So we will we'll see if I can make it a little bit better for you guys. Test. So it is a little bit louder now. But all right. So as I was saying, Dr. Craig prefaces this chapter with Romans chapter 1, verse 20, which reads, ever since the creation of the world, his invisible nature, namely his eternal power and deity, has been clearly perceived in the things that have been made. So as a reminder, I'm reading these things out loud because I don't because it's come to my attention that not everyone has the resources available to get these books or the motivation to do them. So we're reading it together. I hope you follow along. The ancient Greek philosophers were struck with the order that pervades the cosmos. The stars and the planets in their constant revolution across the night sky were especially awesome to the ancients. Plato's academy lavished extensive time and thought on the study of astronomy because Plato believed it was the science that would awaken man to his divine destiny. And here's Plato. Around 387 BC, the Greek philosopher Plato purchased a house in a park known as Academica, just outside Athens. And there he opened a school that flourished for an astonishing 900 years until it was shut down by the Byzantine emperor in AD 529. Plato's goal was to search for truth by means of rational inquiry. The academy drew both senior thinkers and younger students who explored together by means of dialogue profound questions concerning the ultimate nature of reality, the good, the soul, logic, mathematics, and astronomy, as well as politics and society. Among the pupils who came to study at the academy was an 18-year-old named Aristotle, who remained there until Plato's death. The influence of the academy upon Western thought and history via those who passed through its gates is incalculable. According to Plato, there are two things that lead men to believe in God: the argument for the existence of the soul and the argument from the order of the motion of the stars and all things under the dominion of the mind, which ordered the universe. Plato employed these arguments to refute atheism and concluded that there must be a best soul who is the maker and father of all, the king, who ordered the primordial chaos into the rational cosmos that we observe today. So that's a picture of Aristotle, by the way. An even more magnificent statement of divine design is to be found in a fragment from a lost work of Aristotle entitled On Philosophy. Aristotle, too, was filled with wonder at the majestic sweep of the glittering host across the night sky of ancient Greece. Anyone who has personally studied the heavens must lend a sympathetic ear to these men of antiquity who gazed up into the night sky, undimmed by pollution and the glare of city lights, and watched the slow but irresistible turn of the cosmos, replete with its planets, stars, and familiar constellations across their view, and wondered, what is the cause of all this? So now we're up to the first question of the chapter, which says that go outside at night and look up at the sky. How is what you see different from what Aristotle might have seen? How do you think the difference affects the way people today think and feel about the stars and planets? And I got to tell you myself, when I go outside, I have enormous light pollution. It's very difficult to see the stars. And that definitely impacts your sense of grandeur. I have been in places where there isn't as much light pollution, and I've seen the stars, and obviously all of us have seen the pictures that the Hubble Space Telescope or the James Webb Space Telescope have provided us with, and they are breathtaking, to say the least. So, and as I've said previously, I've always been really interested in the cosmos and stars and planets and their structure and things of that nature. And it's always struck me that the pictures taken from different light wavelengths, I've always been struck by their beauty. And so and it's always caused me to worship God in a deeper way and appreciate his handiwork. But let me know what you guys think. But if there's nothing else, then we'll carry on with the rest of some more of the chapter. So, Do says, not true. Connecticut is just so dark that you can't see the stars. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, I'm telling you, light pollution, it's terrible. So, Aristotle concluded that the cause was a divine intelligence. Do continues, a greater understanding take the allure of the stars away for some. Yeah, it's funny though. I totally agree with you. Yeah, it either takes away your sense of grandeur, or for some people it takes away the sense of grandeur, and for others it deepens it. A lot of scientists, when they get confronted with the grandeur of nature, they actually form a deeper appreciation for nature itself, and there are a lot of scientists that form a deeper appreciation of God through this. But it does also have a tendency to take away other aspects of it. Like Paul says, knowledge puffs up, and it can make it so that since I understand better what's happening right now, it does take away sometimes the sense of awe that usually kind of leads people to a belief in God. But Aristotle concluded that the cause was a divine intelligence. And I will mention really quick here is that the fine-tuning argument tends to be favored by atheists. As far as like arguments go, the fine-tuning argument seems to be respected by a lot of the atheists I interact with online. However, there are also obviously people that don't respect it at all, and have a lot of different ways of confronting the argument. And some of them we're not going to be able to get into tonight because they get really sophisticated. But I have seen many atheists lend a sympathetic ear to the fine-tuning argument. So Aristotle imagined the impact that the sight of the world would have upon a race of men who lived underground and never beheld the sky. When thus they would suddenly gain sight of the earth, seas, and the sky, when they should come to know the grandeur of the clouds and the might of the winds, when they should behold the sun and should learn its grandeur and beauty as well as its power to cause the day by shedding light over the sky. And again, when the night had darkened the lands and they should behold the whole of the sky spangled and adorned with stars, and when they should see the changing lights of the moon as it waxes and wanes, and the risings and settings of all these celestial bodies, their courses fixed and changeless throughout all eternity. When they should behold all these things, most certainly they would have judged both that there exist gods and that all these marvelous works are the handiwork of the gods. In his metaphysics, Aristotle went on to argue that there must be a first uncaused cause, which is God, a living, intelligent, immaterial, eternal, and most good being who is the source of order in the cosmos. Reading the works of these ancient philosophers, one cannot help but think of Paul's words in his letter to the church in Rome. Ever since the creation of the world, his invisible nature, namely his eternal power and deity, have been clearly perceived in the things that have been made. From the earliest times, men, wholly ignorant of the Bible, have concluded on the basis of the design of the universe that God must exist. So we're up to the next section, the rebirth of design. Today, many astronomers, as a result of recent discoveries, are coming to a similar conclusion. Scientists used to think that whatever the very early universe might have been like, given sufficient time and some luck, intelligent life forms like ourselves would eventually evolve somewhere. As a result of discoveries over the last 40 years or so, we now know that that assumption was wrong. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Astronomers have been stunned by the discovery of how complex and delicate a balance of initial conditions must be present in the Big Bang itself if the universe is to permit the existence of intelligent life anywhere at all in the cosmos. This delicate balance of initial conditions has come to be known as the fine-tuning of the universe for life. We've come to discover that the universe is fine-tuned for the existence of intelligent life with a complexity and delicacy that literally defy human comprehension. So there's two kinds of fine-tuning. The first involves the constants of nature, and the second involves the arbitrary physical quantities. So he talks about what the constants of nature are. When the laws of nature are expressed as mathematical equations, which you can see on the bottom of the page there, certain constants feature prominently in them. Consider, for example, Newton's famous law of gravity. It states the equation, and then according to this equation, the force of gravity symbolized by F, as you can see there, is equal to the value of the gravitational constant G multiplied by the masses of the two bodies that are being attracted to each other, divided by the distance between them squared. The masses and the distance may vary depending on the objects that you're talking about, but the value of G is constant. So when he's talking about the constants of nature, the example given here is G, the gravitational constant. So nature's constants. First, the constants of nature. What is a constant? When the laws of nature are expressed as mathematical equations, you find appearing in them certain symbols that stand for unchanged quantities, like the force of gravity, the electromagnetic force, and the subatomic weak force. These unchanging quantities are called constants. The laws of nature do not determine the value of these constants. There could be universes governed by the same laws of nature, even though these constants had very different values. So the actual values of the various constants are not determined by nature's laws. Depending on the values of those constants, universes governed by the same laws of nature will look very different. So now we're going to talk about, imagine a universe in which the gravitational constant G was considerably stronger than in our universe. Do you think there would be galaxies in that universe, and why? Let me know what you guys think. But I've studied these things, so I already know that if the gravitational force was stronger, and you can kind of just infer this intuitively if you understand how gravity works. Like if G, the gravitational constant, was considerably stronger, then the universe wouldn't be able to expand at the moment of the Big Bang. So if the material of the universe wasn't moving away from each other, then they would never form stars. It would just collapse back into itself instantly, and there would be no stars. There would be no. If there's no stars, there's no planets. If no planets, then there's no life. And if you go in the reverse, if the gravitational constant is too weak, then again stars won't form because there wouldn't be enough gravitational force to grab all the gases together to form a star. And then once again, you have the same problem, like no planets and no life. There's other side effects as well of messing around with the gravitational constants. So, let's go on and carry on. So, arbitrary quantities. In addition to the constants, there are certain arbitrary quantities that are just put in as initial conditions on which the laws of nature operate. Because these quantities are arbitrary, they're also not determined by the laws of nature. An example would be the amount of thermodynamic disorder or entropy in the early universe. It's just given in the Big Bang as an initial condition, and the laws of nature then take over and determine how the universe will develop from there. If the initial quantities had been different, then the laws would predict that a quite different universe would result. Definition of fine-tuning. Now, what scientists have been surprised to discover is that these constants and quantities must fall into an extraordinarily narrow range of values for the universe to be life-permitting. This is what is meant by the fine-tuning of the universe for life. Examples of fine-tuning. Fine-tuning in this neutral sense is uncontroversial and well-established. Physics abound with examples of fine-tuning. Before I share a few, let me give you some numbers to give you a feel for the delicacy of the fine-tuning. The number of seconds in the entire history of the universe is around 10 to the 17th power. That's 1 followed by 17 zeros, and it looks like that. The number of subatomic particles in the entire known universe is said to be around 10 to the 80th power. That's a 1 followed by 80 zeros. Such numbers are so huge that they're simply incomprehensible. So he's going to give us a key distinction. The term fine-tuned does not mean designed. The expression is a neutral term that doesn't say anything about how the fine-tuning is best explained. The fine-tuning just means that the range of life-permitting values for the constants and quantities is extremely narrow. If the value of even one of these constants or quantities were to be altered by a hair's breadth, the delicate balance required for the existence of life would be upset and the universe would be life-prohibiting instead. Now, with those numbers in mind, consider the following examples of fine-tuning. The so-called weak force. One of the four fundamental forces of nature, which operates inside the nucleus of an atom, is so finely tuned that an alteration of its value by even 1 part out of 10 to the 100th power would have prevented a life-preventing universe. Similarly, a change in the value of the so-called cosmological constant, which drives the acceleration of the universe's expansion by as little as 1 part in 10 to the 120th power, would have rendered the universe life-prohibiting. Remember the low entropy state in which the universe began. We talked about it in Chapter 4 under the laws of thermodynamics. Roger Penrose of Oxford University has calculated that the odds of the low entropy states existing by chance alone is on the order of 1 chance out of 10 to the 10th power to the 123rd power. A number that is so inconceivable that to call it astronomical would be a wild understatement. All right, so let's talk about something. How does it affect you to know that the universe is so precisely fine-tuned? So when confronted with these kinds of numbers, and it can be shocking at first, quite shocking, and it really makes you understand how inconceivable it is for life to actually exist on Earth. These changes are very small changes. So it can really make you wonder, how is it possible that we just happen to be in a universe that is like this? It's absurdly unlikely, and I'm a big fan of fine-tuning. Well, so the fine-tuning argument, I have a love-hate relationship with it because I think it's a great argument. And I use this kind of reasoning for a lot of my other arguments. However, the fine-tuning argument is really hard to actually run. And the reason for that is because you kind of have to know the numbers. You really have to know the numbers in order to really be persuasive about it. And because you can't be like, well, if you just have a tiny change, and there could be like, well, what kind of change are we talking here? Sometimes it's hard to remember that it's 1 part in 10 to the 100th power, and then what exactly is that change, that finely tuned feature of the universe associated with, like the weak force, and we see that from here. But when you just have to sit down and really study this stuff, and so, like, the fine-tuning argument can be kind of hard to run unless you really like numbers and the constants and the equations. I just find that if you're talking with someone, that I kind of get bogged down with trying to remember the numbers, and so I feel like I'm less effective. But other people can definitely be good with this, that's for sure. So Dew says, still probably better than my odds of winning the lottery. No way, bro. No, your odds of winning the lottery are way better. Anyway, so the fine tuning here is beyond comprehension. Having an accuracy of even 1 part out of 10 to the 60th power is like firing a bullet towards the other end of the observable universe, 20 billion light years away, and nailing a 1-inch target. The examples of fine-tuning are so many and so various that they aren't likely to disappear with the advance of science. So like it or not, fine-tuning is just a fact of life that is scientifically well established. Now, some of you might be thinking, but if the constants and quantities had different values, then maybe different forms of life might have evolved. But that underestimates the truly disastrous consequences of a change in the values of these constants and quantities. When scientists say a universe is life permitting, they're not talking about just present forms of life. By life, scientists just mean the property of organisms to take in food, extract energy from it, grow, adapt to their environment, and reproduce. Anything that can fill those functions counts as life, whatever form it might take. And in order for life so defined to exist, the constants and quantities of the universe have to be unbelievably fine-tuned. In the absence of fine-tuning, not even matter, not even chemistry would exist, much less planets where life might have evolved. Another objection, and its answer. Sometimes people will object, but maybe in a universe governed by different laws of nature, such disastrous consequences might not result. But this observation betrays a misunderstanding of the argument. We're not concerned with universes governed by different laws of nature. We have no idea what such universes might be like. Rather, we're concerned solely with universes governed by the same laws of nature, but with different values of the constants and arbitrary quantities. Because the laws are the same, we can determine what would happen if the constants and quantities were to be altered, and the results turn out to be disastrous. Among universes governed by our laws of nature, there's almost no chance that a randomly chosen universe would be life permitting. Very important feature to remember about the argument. So, a fly on the wall. The philosopher John Leslie gives the following illustration to show why we needn't to be concerned with universes governed by different laws of nature. Imagine a solitary fly resting on a large blank area of the wall. A single shot is fired and the bullet strikes the fly. Now, even if the rest of the wall outside of the blank area is covered with flies, so that a randomly fired bullet would probably hit one, nevertheless, it remains highly improbable that a single randomly fired bullet would strike the solitary fly within the large blank area. A life-permitting universe is like the solitary fly on the wall. When we consider universes governed by our laws of nature, almost all of them are life-prohibiting. So the odds that a universe selected randomly out of the slot would be life-permitting is practically nil. An argument for design. The question we face then is this: what is the best explanation for the fine-tuning, the cosmic fine-tuning? Many people think that the reason the universe is finely tuned for life is because it was designed to be life-permitting by an intelligent designer. But design is not the only alternative. There are also physical necessity and chance. The key to inferring that design is the best explanation will be eliminating these other two alternatives. Accordingly, we can present a very simple three-step argument. Number one, the fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Number two, it is not due to physical necessity or chance. Number three, therefore, it is due to design. This is a logically valid argument whose conclusion follows necessarily from the two premises. So the only question is whether those premises are more plausibly true than false. So let's look at them. All right, so it gives us explanations for fine-tuning. The three possible reasons for our universe is why our universe is fine-tuned for life are physical necessity, and that just means that the constants and quantities must have the values that they do. Chance, the constants and quantities have the values that they do simply by accident, and design, the constants and quantities are designed to have the values they do. Some people on the fine-tuning argument like to say a mixture of chance and necessity. I'm not sure if that's really necessary. So regarding the first premise, the fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. The first premise, that the universe is due to physical necessity, chance, or design, is unobjectionable because it just lists the three alternatives available for explaining the fine-tuning. If someone has a fourth alternative, he's welcome to add it to the list and we'll consider it. When we come to premise two, and we'll consider it when we come to premise 2. But there doesn't seem to be an other alternative to the 3 listed here. So now let's talk about a question. In popular culture, where do you see chance promoted as an explanation for our world? What about necessity? What about design? Which of these ideas do you think gets the most airtime on popular level? So the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about chance as being promoted as an explanation for our world is I think of Rick and Morty, and so like there's Ricks from all sorts of universes, and it seems to be the case that the multiverse is in existence there, and the differences of the universe is brought about by chance, and also changes as a result of free will choices, but which some people argue that free will is as a result of chance, but yeah, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And as far as physical necessity, I don't really see much in the way of that. If you want to give me some examples, I'd appreciate it. But I can't think of any that promote a physical necessity kind of view in popular culture. And what about design? I can't think of anything popularly that talks about the universe being created by design. I do remember, and it comes to mind again, Rick and Morty, that he had created a sub-universe to be a battery for his car, and that universe is definitely due to design because it was Rick's design. But other than that, I don't think that it's really portrayed that there is a God figure in Rick and Morty. I can't remember. I haven't watched all of that show. So let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear what you guys have in mind when it comes to airtime. As far as airtime, right off the bat, I'm thinking that chance has the most explanation. I'm also thinking now of like multiverse kind of stuff. Yeah, the new Loki series. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, Marvel stuff. And that, to me, seems like chance. Wouldn't you agree? Isn't it the case that the multiverse is a result of differences in actions of free agents, and that at least in the first season of Loki, like the he who remains kind of made it so that there was no free will and that he wrote the script. So it really gets confusing. And Khan was like the closest thing that you could get to like a god character in that universe, but like you can't kill God, so isn't that close. But yeah, and then maybe if that Khan creature, he who remained, maybe that would be an instance of, no, it would be an instance of design, right? So it's hard to say. I still think that chance is definitely the most popular airtime nowadays, for sure. Anyway, going on to premise 2, the fine-tuning is not due to physical necessity or chance. So the crucial premise is the second premise, that the fine-tuning is not due to physical necessity or chance. Let's examine each of these alternatives in turn. All right, so an end run around evolution. Notice that by focusing on cosmic fine-tuning, this argument does an end run around the whole emotionally charged issue of biological evolution. The argument from fine-tuning, if successful, will show that the evolution of intelligent life anywhere in the cosmos depends upon the design of the initial cosmic conditions. Any design arguments based on the origin of life and the origin of biological complexity and the origin of consciousness and so on will simply layer on more improbability, making it all the more unlikely that all this can be explained apart from a designer. So, physical necessity. According to the first alternative, physical necessity, the universe has to be life-permitting. The constants and quantities must have the values they do, so that a life-prohibiting universe is physically impossible. So the implausibility of physical necessity. Now, in the face of it, this alternative seems fantastically implausible, and which I definitely agree. It would require us to say that a life-prohibiting universe is a physical impossibility. But why take such a radical view? The constants are not determined by the laws of nature, so why couldn't they be different? Moreover, the arbitrary quantities are just boundary conditions on which the laws of nature operate. Nothing seems to make them necessary. So the opponent of design is taking a radical line that requires some proof, but there is none. The alternative is put forward as a bare possibility. Sometimes scientists do talk of a yet-to-be-discovered theory of everything, TOE, which certainly sounds like a physical explanation of everything, including fine-tuning, but like so many of the colorful names given to scientific theories, this label is very misleading. A successful TOE would enable us to identify the four basic forces of nature: gravity, the weak force, the strong force, and electromagnetism, into a single force carried by a single kind of particle. It would result in a great simplification of physics, but it wouldn't even attempt to explain literally everything. For example, the most promising candidate for a TOE to date, so-called M theory or superstring theory, only works if there are 11 dimensions. But the theory itself can't explain why just that particular number of dimensions should exist. Moreover, M theory doesn't predict uniquely a life-permitting universe. It permits a vast range of around 10 to the 500th power different possible universes, all consistent with the same laws but varying in the values of the constants of nature. Almost all of these possible universes are life-prohibiting. So some explanation is needed why, out of all these possibilities, a life-permitting universe exists. We can't say that life-permitting universes are physically necessary, since based on M theory, at least that's clearly false. The cosmic landscape. The so-called cosmic landscape of worlds permitted by M theory has become something of a phenom lately. A phenom? It's important to understand that the landscape is just a range of possibilities. Some people have misinterpreted it to mean that all these different universes actually exist. Some have thought it undermines the argument for design because the landscape must include life-permitting worlds like ours. But the cosmic landscape is not real. It's just a list of possibilities. It describes the range of universes that are consistent with M theory. So there is no evidence that a life-permitting universe is physically necessary. Quite the contrary. All the evidence indicates that life-prohibiting universes are not only possible, but far, far more likely than any life-permitting universe. So moving on to chance. That leads to the second alternative. Could the fine-tuning be due simply to chance? According to this alternative, it's just an accident that all the constants and quantities fell into the life-permitting range. We basically just lucked out. The fundamental problem here is that the chances that the universe that exists should happen to be life-permitting are so remote that this alternative becomes unreasonable. Improbability of life-permitting universe. Sometimes people object that it's meaningless to speak of the probability of a fine-tuned universe existing because there is, after all, only one universe. So you can't say that out of every 10 universes, for example, is life-permitting. But the following illustration from the physicist John Barrow clarifies the sense in which a life-permitting universe is improbable. Take a sheet of paper and place upon it a red dot. That dot represents our universe. Now alter slightly one or more of the finely tuned constants and physical quantities that we've been discussing. As a result, we have a description of another universe, which we can represent as a new dot in the neighborhood of the first. If the new set of constants and quantities described in a life-permitting universe describes a life-permitting universe, make it a red dot. If it describes a universe that is life-prohibiting, make it a blue dot. Now repeat the procedure over and over again until the sheet is filled with dots. So what you wind up with is a sea of blue, with only a few pinpoints of red. That's the sense in which it is overwhelmingly improbable that the universe should be life-permitting. There are simply vastly more life-prohibiting universes in our local area of possible universes than there are life-permitting universes. So, lottery illustration. Sometimes people will appeal to the example of a lottery in order to justify the chance alternative. In a lottery where all the tickets are sold, it's fantastically improbable that any one person should win, yet somebody has to win. It would be unjustified for the winner, whoever he may be, to say the odds against my winning were 20 million to 1, and yet I won. The lottery must have been rigged. In the same way, they say some universe out of the range of possible universes has to exist. The winner of the universal lottery would also be unjustified to think that because his universe exists, this must have been the result of design, not chance. All universes are equally improbable, but one of them, by chance, has to win. This analogy is actually very helpful because it enables us to see clearly where the advocate of chance has misunderstood the argument for design, and to offer a better, more accurate analogy in its place. Contrary to popular impression, the argument for design is not trying to explain why this particular universe exists. Rather, it's trying to explain why a life-permitting universe exists. The lottery analogy was misconceived because it focuses on why a particular person won. The correct analogy would be a lottery in which billions and billions and billions of white ping pong balls were mixed together with just one black ping pong ball, and you were told that the one ball will be randomly selected out of the horde. If it's black, you'll be allowed to live. If it's white, you'll be shot. Now notice that any particular ball that is randomly selected is equally improbable. No matter which ball rolls down the chute, the odds against the particular ball are fantastically improbable, but some ball must roll down the chute. This is the point illustrated by the first lottery analogy. That point, however, is irrelevant because we're not trying to explain why this particular ball was picked. The crucial point is whichever ball rolls down the chute, it is overwhelmingly more probable that it will be white rather than black. Getting the black ball is no more improbable than getting any particular white ball, but it is incomprehensibly more probable that you will be getting a white ball instead of a black one. So if the black ball rolls down the chute, you certainly should suspect that the lottery was rigged to let you live. So reinforcing the lottery story. If you're having difficulty seeing the point of the lottery analogy in the text, then imagine that in order for you to live, the black ball had to be randomly picked 5 times in a row. If the odds against getting the black ball even once are great enough, then getting it 5 times rather than once wouldn't affect the probability significantly. But if you got the black ball 5 times in a row, everyone would recognize that it didn't happen by chance. So in the correct analogy, we're not interested in why you got the particular ball you did. Rather, we're puzzled by why, against overwhelming odds, you got a life-permitting ball rather than a life-prohibiting ball. That question is just not addressed by saying, well, some ball had to be picked. In the same way, some universe has to exist. But whichever universe exists, it is incomprehensibly more probable that it will be life-prohibiting rather than life-permitting. So we still need some explanation for why a life-permitting universe exists. And is an explanation needed? Some people have argued that no explanation is needed for why we observe a life-permitting universe because that's the only kind of universe we can observe. If the universe were not life-permitting, then we wouldn't be here to ask about it. This is the so-called anthropic principle, which says that we can observe only properties of the universe that are compatible with our existence. So the anthropic principle provides it to us again. We can observe only those values of the fundamental constants and quantities that are compatible with our existence. This reasoning is fallacious. The fact that we can observe only a life-permitting universe does nothing to eliminate the need for an explanation for why a life-permitting universe exists. Again, an illustration can help. Imagine you're traveling abroad and arrested on trumped-up drug charges. You're dragged in front of a firing squad of 100 trained marksmen standing at point-blank range. You hear the command given, "Ready, aim, fire!" You hear the deafening sound of guns, and then you observe that you're still alive, that all of the 100 marksmen missed. Now, what would you conclude? Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that they've all missed. After all, if they hadn't all missed, I wouldn't be here to be surprised about it. Nothing more to be explained here. Of course not. It's not that you shouldn't be surprised that you don't observe that you're dead, since if you were dead, you wouldn't be able to observe it. But you should still be surprised that you do observe that you're alive. In light of the enormous improbability that all the marksmen would miss, indeed, you probably conclude that they all missed on purpose, that the whole thing was set up, engineered for some reason by someone. I feel like I need to make a mention of this because I watched an atheist YouTube video that used the firing squad analogy in order to discount the fine-tuning argument, and it's funny because he used the firing squad analogy to try to show how absurd it is to say that God is the reason for the fine-tuning of the universe. Because if everyone missed, then it must be, he's saying that the analogy is, if everyone missed, then it must be the case that God forced all the bullets to miss or something like that. And that's not the analogy. The analogy is that there must be a design for why you're still alive. And it could be the fact that somebody made sure that all blanks were in the guns, or that people there colluded to determine that they weren't going to shoot you, things like that. So just thought I'd make a mention of that. You're going to find a lot of people using analogies incorrectly online. So the many worlds hypothesis. Theorists have therefore come to recognize that the anthropic principle cannot eliminate the need for an explanation of the fine-tuning unless it's conjoined with a many worlds hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, our universe is but one member of a world ensemble or multiverse of randomly ordered universes, preferably infinite in number. If all of these other universes really exist, then by chance alone, life-permitting worlds will appear somewhere in the world ensemble. Since only finely tuned universes can have observers in them, any observers existing in the world ensemble will naturally observe their world to be finely tuned. So no appeal to design is necessary to explain fine-tuning. It's pure chance. So the first response to the many worlds hypothesis. One way to respond to the many worlds hypothesis would be to show that the multiverse itself also involves fine-tuning. For in order to be scientifically credible, some plausible mechanism must be suggested for generating the many worlds. But if the many worlds hypothesis is to be successful at attributing fine-tuning to chance alone, then the mechanism that generates the many worlds had better not be fine-tuned itself. For if it is, then the problem arises all over again. How do you explain the fine-tuning of the multiverse? The proposed mechanisms for generating a world ensemble are so vague that it's far from clear that the physics governing the multiverse will not involve any fine-tuning. For example, if M theory is the physics of the multiverse, then it remains unexplained, as we've seen, why exactly 11 dimensions exist. And the mechanisms that actualizes all the possibilities of the cosmic landscape may involve fine-tuning. So the postulate of a world ensemble is by itself not enough to justify the alternative of chance. A backhanded compliment to design. The current debate over fine-tuning has now become a debate over the many worlds hypothesis. In order to explain fine-tuning, we're being asked to believe not merely that there are other unobservable universes, but that there is an infinite number of such worlds, and that they randomly vary in their fundamental constants and quantities. All this is needed to guarantee that a life-permitting universe like ours will appear by chance in the ensemble. The many worlds hypothesis is really a sort of backhanded compliment to the design hypothesis. For otherwise, sober scientists would not be flocking to adopt so speculative and extravagant a view as the many worlds hypothesis unless they felt absolutely compelled to. So if someone says to you the fine-tuning could have happened by chance, or the improbable happens, or it's just dumb luck, ask him, then why do the detractors of design feel compelled to embrace an extravagance like the many worlds hypothesis in order to avoid design? All right, so the second response to the many worlds hypothesis. Moreover, many theorists are skeptical of the many worlds hypothesis itself. Why think that a world ensemble actually exists? We saw in Chapter 4 that the Borguth-Lincoln theorem requires that even a multiverse of bubble universes must have a beginning. In that case, a mechanism that generates the bubble universes has been chugging away for only a finite amount of time. So by now, there may well be only a finite number of bubbles in the world ensemble, which may not be enough to guarantee the appearance of a finely tuned universe by chance alone. There's no evidence that the sort of world ensemble required by the many worlds hypothesis actually exists. By contrast, we have good independent reasons for believing in a designer of the cosmos, as Leibniz and Al-Ghazali's arguments show. All right, so let's talk about something. Given the flaws in the many worlds hypothesis, why do you think so many people prefer to believe in chance rather than in a designer? I think that it's a commitment to naturalism. I think that a lot of people have a sense that they must be able to explain all physical phenomenon physically. And so they reject the designer for this reason. Some people want to avoid the existence of God at all costs and are willing to take on crazy ad hoc theories in order to avoid that, and so do so. It may be a mixture of both, but I do think that there is an unjustified bias or an unjustified commitment to naturalism, or what some people like to call methodological naturalism. And Dew says most people don't realize how small of a chance it is. I think that you're right on that too. It's funny because like nowadays people accept this multiverse point of view without really understanding why it came about in the first place. The multiverse, as Dr. Craig is describing, came about as a response to us discovering how ridiculously fine-tuned the universe is. It's like, it's absurd that this universe should exist by happenstance. So we got to create this multiverse of infinite number of other universes so that it can even be conceivable that our universe actually does exist. So now, not only is there a possibility of a life-permitting universe to exist, but now since we're talking about an infinite number of universes, there's not only some life-permitting universes, there's now an infinite number of life-permitting universes. So now it's no longer a problem. We're good to go. But yeah, man, it's that is kind of frustrating, actually. All right, let's see here. The third response to the many worlds hypothesis. Moreover, the many worlds hypothesis faces what may be a devastating objection. Remember Boltzmann's many worlds hypothesis discussed in Chapter 4? What sank Boltzmann's hypothesis was the fact that if our universe is just a random member of a world ensemble, then it's vastly more probable that we should be observing a much smaller region of order. It turns out that a parallel problem faces the many worlds hypothesis as an explanation for cosmic fine-tuning. Roger Penrose has pressed this objection forcefully. He points out that the odds of our universe's initial low entropy conditions existing by chance alone are 1 chance out of 10 to the 10th power to the 123rd power. By contrast, the odds of our solar systems suddenly forming by random collision of particles is 1 chance out of 10 to the 10th power to 60th. This number, says Penrose, is utter chicken feed in comparison to 10 to the 10th power 123rd. What that means is that it is far, far, far more likely that we should be observing an orderly universe no larger than our solar system, since a world that of that size is unfathomably more probable than a finely tuned universe like ours. In fact, we wind up with the same sort of illusionism that saddled Boltzmann's hypothesis. A small world with the illusion of a wider, orderly universe is more probable than a fine-tuned real universe. Carried to its logical extreme, this has led to what theorists have called the invasion of the Boltzmann brains. For the most probable observable universe is one that consists of a single brain that pops into existence by random fluctuation with illusory perceptions of the orderly cosmos. So if you accept the many worlds hypothesis, you're obligated to believe that you are all that exists and that this book, your body, the earth, and everything you perceive in the world are just illusions. No sane person believes that he is a Boltzmann brain. Given atheism, therefore, is highly improbable that there exists a randomly ordered world ensemble. Ironically, the best hope for partisans of the multiverse is to maintain that God created it and ordered its worlds so that they're not randomly ordered. God could give a preference to observable worlds that are cosmically fine-tuned. To be rationally acceptable, the many worlds hypothesis needs God. With the failure of the many worlds hypothesis, the last ring of defense for the alternative of chance collapses. Neither physical necessity nor chance provides a good explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe. All right, so design, Dawkins' objection. So what about design? Is this explanation better than a physical necessity or chance, or is it equally implausible? Detractors of design sometimes object that on this hypothesis, the cosmic designer himself remains unexplained. The objection is what Richard Dawkins calls the central argument of his book, The God Delusion. He summarizes his argument as follows. Premise 1, and this is going to be rough because Dawkins is not a philosopher. All right, so premise 1. One of the greatest challenges to the human intellect has been to explain how the complex, improbable appearance of design in the universe arises. Premise 2. The natural temptation is to attribute the appearance of design to actual design itself. Number 3. The temptation is a false one because the designer hypothesis immediately raises the larger problem of who designed the designer. Number 4, the most ingenious and powerful explanation is Darwinian evolution by natural selection. Number 5, we don't have an equivalent explanation for physics. Number 6, we should not give up the hope of a better explanation arising in physics, something as powerful as Darwinism is for biology. Therefore, God almost certainly does not exist. So, the invalidity of Dawkins' argument. The conclusion doesn't follow. Dawkins' argument is jarring because the atheistic conclusion, therefore God almost certainly does not exist, doesn't follow from the 6 previous statements, even if we concede that each of them is true. There are no rules of logic that would permit such an inference. Dawkins' argument is plainly invalid. At most, all that follows from Dawkins' argument is that we should not infer God's existence on the basis of the appearance of design in the universe. But that conclusion is quite compatible with God existing and even with our justifiably believing in God's existence. Maybe we should believe in God on the basis of the cosmological argument or the moral argument. Maybe our belief in God isn't based on arguments at all, but is grounded in religious experience or in divine revelation. The point is that rejecting design arguments for God's existence does nothing to prove that atheism is true or that belief in God is unjustified. Dawkins' lack of philosophical depth is plainly on display here. Falsity of Dawkins' premises. But does Dawkins' argument succeed even in undermining the argument for design? Not at all. For several of the steps of Dawkins' arguments are plausibly false. Step 5 refers to the cosmic fine-tuning that has been the focus of our discussion. Dawkins has nothing by way of explaining for it, and therefore the hope expressed in step 6 represents nothing more than the faith of a naturalist. So Dr. Craig goes on to explain what naturalism is. Naturalism is the belief that only the natural explanations, as opposed to supernatural ones, should be considered. Because a designer is defined as supernatural, that is beyond nature, naturalism rules out this explanation regardless of evidence. And I have YouTube videos that explain naturalism in more detail and why I personally think that it doesn't deserve a seat at the table. But yeah, if you want to check those out, that'd be good. Moreover, consider step 3. Dawkins's claim here is that we are not justified in inferring design as the best explanation of the complex order of the universe, because then a new problem arises. Who designed the designer? The first problem of step 3. You don't need to explain the explanation. This claim is flawed on at least 2 counts. First, in order to recognize an explanation as the best, you don't need to have an explanation of the explanation. This is an elementary point in philosophy of science. If archaeologists digging in the earth were to discover things looking like arrowheads and pottery shards, they would be justified in inferring that these artifacts are not the chance result of sedimentation and metamorphosis, but the products of some unknown group of people, even though they had no explanation for who these people were or where they came from. Similarly, if astronauts were to come upon a pile of machinery in the backside of the moon, they would be justified in inferring that it was the product of intelligent agents, even if they had no idea whatsoever who these agents were or how they got there. So in order to recognize an explanation as the best, you don't need to be able to explain the explanation. In fact, such requirement would lead to an infinite regress of explanations, so that nothing could ever be explained and science would be destroyed. For before any explanation could be acceptable, you'd need an explanation of it, and then an explanation of the explanation of the explanation, and then nothing could ever be explained. So in the case at hand, in order to recognize that intelligent design is the best explanation of the appearance of design in the universe, one needn't be able to explain the designer. Whether the designer has an explanation can simply be left an open question for future inquiry. So second problem of step 3, God is remarkably simple. Second, Dawkins thinks that in the case of the divine designer of the universe, the designer is just as complex as the thing to be explained, so that no explanatory advance is made. This objection raises all sorts of questions about the role played by simplicity in assessing competing explanations. For example, there are many other factors besides simplicity that scientists weigh in determining which explanation is the best, such as explanatory power, explanatory scope, and so forth. An explanation that has broader explanatory scope may be less simple than a rival explanation, but still be preferred because it explains more things. Simplicity is not the only or even most important criteria for assessing theories. So, given the flaws of Dawkins's reasoning, how do you account for the huge popularity of his book? More than 1.5 million copies sold. What other logic might explain this popular appeal? I don't know why Dawkins's book is so popular. I do own it. I started reading it, but man, it's he's so arrogant and also very toxic. So it's hard for me to read it, but I do really need to sit down and get through it. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's just because at the time, the internet was incredibly toxic, and I still think it's very toxic today. But this kind of toxicity resonates with a lot of people, and he is able to talk persuasively in writing. He has a writing voice that kind of carries you along, and it definitely is. His rhetoric is really good, even if his philosophy and logic is not. But let me know what you guys think. I'm interested in hearing it. So moving on, but leave those questions aside. Dawkins's fundamental mistake lies in his assumption that a divine designer is just as complex as the universe. This is plainly false. As a pure mind without a body, God is a remarkably simple entity. A mind or soul is not a physical object composed of parts. In contrast to the contingent and a variegated universe with all its inexplicable constants and quantities, a divine mind is startlingly simple. Certainly, such a mind may have complex ideas. It may be thinking, for example, of the infinitesimal calculus, but the mind itself is a remarkably simple spiritual entity. Dawkins has evidently confused a mind's ideas, which may indeed be complex, with the mind itself, which is an incredibly simple entity. Therefore, postulating a divine mind behind the universe most definitely does not add an advance in simplicity, for whatever that's worth. Other steps in Dawkins's argument are also problematic, but I think enough has been said to show that his argument does nothing to undermine the fine-tuning argument for a cosmic designer. Not to speak of it serving as a justification of atheism. Several years ago, the atheist philosopher Quinton Smith unceremoniously crowned Stephen Hawking's argument against God in a Brief History of Time as the worst atheistic argument in the history of Western thought. With the advance of the God delusion, the time has come, I think, to relieve Hawking of this weighty crown and to recognize Richard Dawkins' ascension to the throne. So think about it. If there really is a designer who fine-tuned the universe, what can we learn about him from the intricacies of the fine-tuning that is needed to create the world like ours? So I think that the fine-tuning argument does a great job of demonstrating God's knowledge, or the knowledge of a spaceless, timeless being, so since it is so fine-tuned, it also it also expresses his omnipotence in order to be able to finely tune the universe in such a way. But I really think that, and I personally, when it comes to God, I don't think that God's omnipotence is very different than his omniscience. I think that when we talk about omniscience, omnipotence, I tend to like to define omnipotence as the power to actualize any potential. And when it comes to God, he actualizes potentials mentally. And so that's related to your knowledge, the knowledge that you have. And so so the world that we live in is a manifestation of God's intellect. And so I think that the fine-tuning really argues for God's omniscience and omnipotence, but they're really closely related. But remember, On Guard is presenting you a cumulative case for Christianity. So first of all, so Dr. Craig is utilizing what's called a classical apologetics approach in this book, and where you argue for the existence of God, and then you argue for Christianity through the resurrection and historical evidences. So he uses a multi-argument approach to showing that God does exist. And then once you show that God exists, then it becomes way more plausible that Jesus' resurrection can occur. If God doesn't exist, then it becomes impossible for resurrections to occur. Du says, not only intelligent, but with the power to act on that intellect unchallenged. Yeah, that's a good point too. Like, there's nobody strong enough to stop God from, doing what he wants to do. That's for sure. So yeah, that's a good point. Like that lends credibility to there just being one omnipotent or super powerful being, arguably omnipotent when you look at the size and scope of the universe, But anyway, we're up to the conclusion already. So, conclusion. Therefore, it seems to me that the three alternatives before us, physical necessity, chance, and design, the most plausible of the three is design. Plato and Aristotle would doubtless have been gratified by modern science's vindication of their views. We have then a third argument in our cumulative case for the existence of God. So that is the end of the chapter. So now we are going to go through the argument map together. And I know how you guys love argument maps. So the first part of the argument map, as you can see on the screen, is that the fine-tuning of the universe is due to going over the first premise. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Fine-tuning is, so you need to emphasize that fine-tuning is a scientific fact. This isn't something that crazy religious people have like made up in order to swindle design in. You know, this is a established scientific fact about the universe. And that these are the only alternatives for explaining fine-tuning. If somebody actually does provide a legitimate fourth option, then we can include that. And some people, like I said, like to give a mixture of necessity and chance. The thing is that all the constants and quantities must be explained by necessity or chance. If even one is better explained by design, then the argument's successful for God. All right, so 2. If it is not due to physical, or premise 2 says it is not due to physical necessity or chance. So the first part is saying it's not physical necessity. The constants and quantities are independent of nature's laws. And someone will say the theory of everything will explain them. Well, the theory of everything doesn't explain everything. Now remember that the theory of everything is meant to tie together the 4 major forces. Okay? If I recall correctly, it's like the gravitational force, the electromagnetic force, and the weak and strong force. Okay? The atomic forces. And M theory fails to predict a life-permitting universe. Okay? So, the next part of the map, boop, is, so not chance. Some universes, some universe must exist no matter how improbable. That's the con. And then, but whichever, so the rebuttal to that con is, but whichever universe exists, it will probably not be life permitting. Okay. Now remember the lottery deal. We're not talking about any particular person winning the lottery. We're talking about winning in the face of terrible odds in favor of another outcome. So it's like not any particular person. So let's say that it's one person versus millions and millions and millions of other people. And the odds of the lottery winning for those millions and millions of other people is preferable. Like it's you versus everyone else. If any one of those other people win, then they would win the lottery. But you're the one that wins against all odds, you know. But in the book, Dr. Craig uses the white ping pong balls versus the one black ping pong ball. Okay, where if you get a white ping pong ball, then you're going to die. If you get a black one, then you live. So, and then they reply, we can observe only life-permitting universes, so no explanation is needed. This, and the reply to that is that this truism does not remove the need for an explanation. Just because it's true that we can only observe universes in which we can actually inhabit doesn't remove the explanation. Why on earth would that remove the need for an explanation? Yes, absolutely, it's true that we can only observe universes in which we can inhabit, but why does this universe exist? You know, I've always found that reply to be odd. And then they talk about the many worlds hypothesis, the multiverse. So the many worlds hypothesis may still require fine-tuning. That's the first response to that. And there's also there are good reasons to reject many worlds hypothesis. The many worlds hypothesis is finite, and the invasion of the Boltzmann brains. Remember, the invasion of the Boltzmann brains is talking about a universe that in which only a single brain inhabits and has illusions of an orderly, expansive universe. If the multiverse or the many worlds hypothesis is true, it is way more likely for you to just be a brain or some sort of entity that has illusions of the external world. So you are much more likely to be the sole being in the universe, which is contrary to intuition, strongly contrary to intuition. Most people do not think that they are the only things that exist. Like I said previously in other streams, I have a very strong belief in the existence of other minds. And then 3, the conclusion, therefore, it is due to design. So this follows from 1 and 2, and then Dawkins says who designs the designer, and then Dr. Craig dismantles that, you don't need to be able to explain the explanation, even though we have already done so with the Leibnizian cosmological argument. Remember that the explanation for God's existence is that he's a necessary being. He cannot fail to exist. Last week, at the end of the week, I actually did a little live stream talking about the Leibnizian cosmological argument and some rebuttals that I often see online to the argument and how to go about addressing those. So if you want, look on the Facebook videos for Northeast Christian Apologetics and take a look at that. Also, letting you guys know that I'm letting you guys know that before we get carried away here, I wish to celebrate with you guys that we got to the end of the chapter together. Yay, we did it. We read it all. Yeah, we did that together. Good job, us. So, I hope that you guys like the celebration with me. Appreciate it. But I'm going to let you guys know as well that I'm uploading these videos to YouTube. So if you don't want to look at them on Facebook, you can look at them on YouTube as well. Or if you have friends that don't go on YouTube, don't go on Facebook, but do go on YouTube, tell them to check it out. I've already gotten some hate on the videos from internet atheists. So if you want to go on there and back me up, I appreciate it. Anyway, but yeah, one more thing that I wanted to mention. I mentioned it in the video that I did last week. I'm thinking about doing a book study on tactics, probably a YouTube live thing, and I got the 10th anniversary version right here in paperback form. I might get it on. I have a Kindle version, but I don't have the 10th anniversary one on the Kindle version. And also, if I get the Kindle version, then I just won't have a signed copy of it. Yeah, I'm such a huge nerd. But I'm planning on getting that started up, and as you can see, I got a little background for it. I might change it to something like what you see, how I have been reading, with this, because it definitely helps out a lot with the how much work I have to do. Reading it like that was definitely easier for me. But let me know what you guys think, if you liked it or not. I really appreciate you guys coming out and doing this study with me. I hope that it can be a blessing to you and help strengthen your faith in Christianity and help you to understand God better and his universe better, and to see how much there is to learn, and that you're not alone. I'm here with you the whole way, and I would love to get in contact with you and talk about this stuff more deeply. We are only scratching the surface here. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, reach out to me. Anyway, thank you for being with me tonight. God bless, and I'll see you later. Hey, before you go, I hope you enjoyed today's enlightening discussion during our Christian Apologetics book study. It's always a blessing to come together to explore our faith and grow in our understanding. Your participation means the world to me, and I'm grateful for your continued support of Northeast Christian Apologetics. Remember, you can stay connected with me and access valuable resources by visiting my website at nechristianapologetics.com. There you'll find a wealth of articles, videos, and recommended reading material to deepen your knowledge of Christian apologetics. If you're as passionate as I am about equipping believers to defend their faith and engage in meaningful conversations, you can also support this ministry in various ways. One way to support this work is through patreon.com. By becoming a patron, you'll have access to exclusive content, early access to our discussions, and a chance to connect with like-minded individuals who share your passion for Christian apologetics. If Patreon is not your style, some people prefer to give me a one-time tip. And if you'd like to do that, then feel free to do so through Venmo or Cash App. But of course, there are many ways to support me. By praying for this ministry, sharing the content on social media, or simply spreading the word about what I do. Every bit of support goes a long way in helping me fulfill my mission. Once again, thank you for joining me today. Your presence and engagement enrich these discussions, and together, we're on a journey to strengthen our faith and share the good news with others. Stay tuned for more exciting book studies, thought-provoking discussions, and opportunities to grow your Christian apologetics journey. I look forward to seeing you again.